Shalom, shalom. Welcome, thank you for being here once again. Today we continue with our free course on the Mishna, that compendium of ancient Jewish texts that reveals the oral tradition, that spirit of holiness that was passed from mouth to mouth and that gives life to the biblical text, and that together form the sacred Torah. Because you must know something and always be very clear. Neither the written Torah alone nor the oral Torah alone work separately. They only work together, like a computer that needs its hardware and its software, or like infinite knowledge that needs a vessel to materialize. Otherwise, there is chaos, tribulation, and ignorance. Just as a body without a soul is a corpse, so a spirit without a body would be wandering and in pain. Before continuing, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with those who seek to understand the world from a different perspective. Thank you for being part of this community that doesn't settle for the superficial, the Código Abel community, with special thanks to my speaker, journalist Abel Flores. Now, before we begin today's class on Mishnah 3, Chapter 1 of Tractate Berakhot, let's briefly review one of the foundations of this course. Understanding context, because without context there is no truth. Did you know that you can be reading a sacred text and not understand anything at all? Not because you don't know how to read, or not only because of that, but simply because you're out of context. Reading the 2nd century Mishnah, which is what we're doing here, with a 21st century mindset is like trying to understand a 19th century love letter with WhatsApp emojis. It sounds ridiculous, but that's what we do. Every day when we ignore the oral tradition that dates back largely to the time of the prophet Moses to read the Torah, the Bible. Without context, there is no understanding. In fact, without context, everything can seem crazy. When you're studying the Mishnah, you have to know that you don't have a temple, there are no pure priests, there are no Levites in their cities, and the Romans are busy annihilating the sages, the rabbis, the pious martyrs, forbidding you from everything that gives identity to your faith: circumcision, keeping Shabbat, studying the Torah, and if you do, death penalty. This was the great tribulation that this generation suffered. There, in the midst of this bleak panorama, the Rabbinic Judaism of this Mishnah was born, which was a transition between the Pharisaic Judaism of the Second Temple in Jerusalem and the current Reformed Rabbinic Judaism. A Judaism that, believe it or not, even if it's hard for you to understand, has nothing to do with the one you hear on YouTube today from the voice of an Orthodox rabbi. Because in 18 centuries, many changes have occurred in the world in the way we live and with the technology used. The problems and circumstances of the Jewish people today are different from those of that time. Because in the 2nd century, the question wasn't whether or not you could turn on the light on Shabbat. There were no electric lights, no microphones, no elevators. No, there was no electricity, no fixed calendar, no printing press, no cell phones to ask Siri what parasha it was this week. There was only one urgency, and this is the most important thing. How do we remain Jewish when everything that made us Jewish has been destroyed, and when being Jewish means paying for it with your life against the powerful and ruthless Roman Empire? You have to understand this, because if you don't understand it, you won't understand the soul of the oral tradition, which to this day is studied in yeshivot or rabbinical schools. Now, what was the central dilemma for this generation of the 2nd century CE? How to keep the commandments of Moses without a temple, without priests, without Jerusalem? How do you pray? When do you begin? When do you end? And even more so, who decides? These were the main questions we will study in the Mishnah, a Judaism reinventing itself, recreating itself, seeking authority, scratching its memories, straining its memory, a collective memory they needed more than ever. This generation of Torah sages are known as the Tanaim, the giants of Judaism, spiritual beings who did not need to read books to remember the commandments, because as God says in the Torah, I will put these commandments in your hearts. By contrast, and we who are in the year 2025 have to understand this, because we have the historical advantage of seeing things in hindsight. There is a crucial difference with the Judaism of the 2nd century, the 16th century, and the 21st century. Judaism in the 16th century begins to become normative. Judaism had already become a religion by then, but not at the time of the Mishnah. From the 16th century, yes, it became a normative structure with books like the Shulchan Aruch that tell you what to do and how to do it with clock and calendar in hand. But in the 2nd century, everything was survival, but contradictory to this, it was also a free Judaism without a yoke, without the dispute between the house of Shammai and Hillel, because Rome had exterminated the school of Shammai. It was a Judaism physically persecuted, but free in spirit, free from the corruption of the Sadducees of the temple, because there was no longer a temple, free of Jews, sold out to the empire, who betrayed their own people to Rome, like Herod, who was a Jew sold out to Rome against the interest of his own brothers. Oh, those rabbis were literally under threat of death, and yet they argued about how to say the blessing over bread to give thanks for food. Does that sound ridiculous? It isn't. It's profoundly heroic and profoundly human. The great tragedy is when we forget that context. When we compare the Judaism of the Mishnah with that of the Kabbalah of the Ari, or the medieval codes, or even with the Judaism of the modern state of Israel, as if everything were part of a single continuum, without ruptures, without traumas, without exiles. On the contrary, there have been cracks, scars, but the most important thing is that the Mishnah is like a tunnel in time that connects us to biblical Judaism, to Second Temple Judaism, to early Christianity, to the Judaism of Jesus or Yeshua and his apostles. This is the greatness of studying the Mishnah. It is the closest and furthest to the teachings of Moses and the biblical prophets. Now, let's delve into a concept that is seen from the creation Bereshit, and the oral Torah, subordinate to the written Torah, follows the same pattern, because the two are one body. This concept is as biblical as it is Talmudic, and it is the bipolarity of creation, the two-dimensionality of the universe. What if I told you that the universe, according to the Bible, is not neutral, that there are no gray areas, no comfortable shades of gray, no middle ground for the undecided, only poles, darkness and light, night and day, heaven and earth, man and woman, uncomfortable? Welcome to the bipolar world of creation. But where is the bipolarity here? God beyond infinity is one and unique, and this is the power of reciting the Shema, which connects you to the origin of all things. And on the other side is the earth, matter, atoms, and we are one too. We are the neutral pole. In terms of electricity, we are the receptors or vessels. We are even neutral, the negative pole, and in some cases, insulators of the energy of the cosmos. So, where is the bipolarity? But to understand this well, very well, we must start from the architecture of the universe. There really is no heaven and earth. There are heavens in the plural and earth in the singular. Why? Because the higher or spiritual worlds, being closer to the Creator, are larger, multiple, and many, because they contain the throne of God. The heavens, plural, are closer to infinity, so in the highest heaven, the highest is the Creator, outside of His creation, hidden from His creation. He is one and unique, and Kabbalah explains that He compressed Himself like a zip file to make room for creation. However, at the other, radically opposite end of the throne of God is the earth, matter, our world, our universe, us. And this world is neutral, neither good nor bad, neutral. We human beings must be co-creators with God and make this world a better place. Before continuing, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with those seeking to understand the world through a different lens. Thank you for being part of this community that doesn't settle for the superficial, the Código Abel community, with special thanks to your speaker, journalist Abel Flores. The bipolarity, the extremes, the two-dimensionality of the universe is in the lower spiritual worlds, which is why the heavens are plural, because there are higher elevated worlds and lower or lower worlds. But the earth is below all these worlds, or the heavens. Upper worlds and heavens are synonymous. Copy? So the struggle is spiritual, which is why every battle in this world is spiritual, not material. Matter is the result or reflection of the spiritual worlds, of spiritual wars, because darkness and light are not in matter. They are reflected in matter. Of course they are, but the struggle is really in the lower heavens. Kabbalah teaches that there are 4 worlds. The first and closest to God is called Atzilut, which translates as a world of light and aristocracy. It is closest to God's throne, but the Creator is still above it. Remember that the Creator is not part of the system. He is hidden within the system, but He is neither the system nor in the system. Here in this world is the best, the highest and most hidden Torah, the seals, the spirit of Messiah ben David. Here are the upper heavens. Here there is only order and light. Then further down is the world of Bria, the world of creation, the world of Bereshit bara. As the first verse of Genesis says, Bria is the world created from nothing. Only God can create these worlds or intermediate heavens. Pajari, here is the Garden of Eden, the revealed Torah, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Here in this world is good and evil, good and bad. From here also come the neshamot, souls for human beings. And from here we can begin to perceive bipolarity, the two dimensions, the extremes. Then further down comes the world of Yetzirah, formation, the lower spiritual world. Here are ideas, thought, telekinesis, the Rusho, which literally translates as winds, but are actually the spirits, good and evil angels. It is the lower spiritual world, the lower heavens. And at the lowest level of this cosmic archetype of the worlds or heavens is the world of Asya. This is our world. It is matter, the planet, the solar systems. This world is neutral, passive, and even functions as the ground of an electrical system, receiving, capturing, diffusing, and materializing. And why do we talk about these topics? Because we need to know that the sages of the Mishnah, the Rabbinic encyclopedia we are studying, have this thought, this logic, and present us with a bipolar world. As we have just explained, the bipolar world does not exist on the throne of God, nor in infinity, because here there is only unity and uniqueness. But it also does not exist at the other extreme, on earth or in matter, on our planet or world, because here everything is neutral. Always remember this when studying the Torah. The bipolarity of good and evil, light and darkness, day and night, only exists in the intermediate spiritual worlds, in the heavens or worlds Bria and Yetzirah. Our world, which is neutral, only perceives and receives what these worlds command, because the power lies in the spiritual worlds. And what good does all this do us if we're talking about the reading of the Shema? Because starting with Mishnah 3, chapter 1, the Tana, the redactor of the Mishnah, will confront the school of Hillel and Shammai. And this struggle, as I have repeated so many times, is not physical, it is spiritual. It is a clash of interpretations of the Torah of the upper worlds, that is, of the heavens, where some will say that the Torah is in heaven and others on earth. But which Torah are they talking about? Obviously not the written one, because Moses brought it down and wrote it. Ladies and gentlemen, the struggle between Hillel and Shammai is about the soul of the Torah, about oral tradition, about how the text is interpreted, and about who has the authority to legislate in Israel, because without Sadducees there is no monarchy. Who legislates for Israel? Before entering today's Mishnah, let's very quickly review the two Mishnayot teachings we covered in previous classes. In Mishnah 1, since when has the night Shema been read? Since the impure Kohanim priests, after purifying themselves in the mikveh, entered to eat their terumah, the first fruits that Israel gave them as the principal tithe, and until when can the night Shema be read? Rabbi Eliezer is the strictest. He was initiated in the school of Shammai, but now in the school of Hillel, due to the destruction of his first school. He interprets it as his first teacher, the house of Shammai, and he is strict, very strict, and says that it is read until the first night watch around 10 p.m. Rabbi Gamliel of the school of Hillel, a more pragmatic and humanistic one, says that the limit of the Torah is the entire night until dawn, so that people can fulfill more commandments at night, such as rejoicing at the wedding of poor people, that is, fulfilling commandments with their neighbors before going to bed so early. And the third opinion is that of the Chachamim, who made a positive rabbinic decree called takana, which says that it is valid until the middle of the night, that is, until the second night watch, about 2 a.m. And they did this to create a protective fence around the Torah, because they want to prevent people from falling asleep or becoming careless and wasting time reciting the night Shema, which is the first commandment that every Jew must fulfill every day at sunset, because the day of the Torah begins at night. A chidush, or novelty in this review, is that not reading the night Shema does not protect one from negative spiritual forces, which puts one in danger. So that's why the Chachamim sages placed this fence around the Torah. Another, even deeper reason is that not reading the night Shema puts one in danger of karet, of being cut off from eternal life. So in cases like this, the sages have to issue rabbinic decrees to protect the fulfillment of the Torah. Then, in the second class, we saw, since when can one read the morning Shema? We explained that the first two commandments a Jew fulfills are the same. the evening Shema and the morning Shema. The sages teach that from the moment you can differentiate between light blue and white, that is when the sun begins to rise, Rabbi Eliezer, the strict one who interprets according to Shammai, even though he is now a disciple of Hillel, says it's until you can differentiate between blue and green. In other words, he makes things more difficult. The question is also asked, until when can you read the morning Shema? Rabbi Eliezer is strict again and says that you must recite the morning Shema just as the sun rises. You can already imagine why his fellow Chachamim excommunicated him. It seems he was unbearable and never adhered to the majority's interpretation. And finally, Rabbi Yehoshua, the rabbi of the sleepyheads, appears and says that you can read the morning Shema until 9 Bospan AM, which is the time kings wake up, and Israel is a nation of kings and priests, a holy nation, as Moses wrote. The new chidush in this review of Mishnah 2 is that the Chachamim did not declare anything about a protective fence around the Torah. Why did they do so in the nighttime Shema? Because of the dangers of the night and because not reciting the nighttime Shema is a grave sin. In contrast, in the morning Shema, they left it up to the people to decide what to do. Those who want to be early risers like Rabbi Eliezer can do so. Those who want to be more of a sleepyhead can do so. Because no matter what, throughout the day, the Jew was going to pray at some point, and whether or not they recited the morning Shema at any time, it would be counted as righteousness for them, whether they recited it or read it, which is counted as Torah study. In other words, the Chachamim here interpret the morning Shema and Torah study as complementary. They are the same precept. Now then, it's time for today's class. Tractate Berakhot, chapter 1, Mishnah teaching 3. It says, Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel disputed the correct way to recite the Shema. Beit Shammai says one must recite the Shema in the manner indicated in the text of the Shema itself. Therefore, at night, each person should recline on his side and recite the Shema in fulfillment of the verse. When you lie down, and in the morning he should stand and recite the Shema in fulfillment of the verse. When you rise, as it says, when you lie down and when you rise. And Beit Hillel says, each person recites the Shema as he is, and may do so in whatever position is most comfortable for him, both during the day and at night, as it says, and when you walk along the road, when one is neither standing nor reclining. Mary, if so, according to Beit Hillel, why was it said, when you lie down and when you get up? This is merely to denote time, at the time when people go to bed and at the time when people get up. Regarding this halasha, Rabbi Tarfon said, once I was going along the road when I stopped and reclined to recite the Shema according to the command of Beit Shammai. Although Rabbi Tarfon was a disciple of Beit Hillel, he believed that performing the mitzvah according to the opinion of Beit Shammai would be a more meticulous fulfillment of the mitzvah acceptable to all opinions. However, in doing so, I put myself in danger because of the highwaymen listim who harass travelers. The sages told him, you deserve to be in a position where you would be responsible to pay with your life, since you transgressed the commandment of Beit Hillel. Now let's continue explaining what's happening here. I think or hope everyone is beginning to understand the dilemma, the controversy, the problem. There are two different visions of how the Torah is fulfilled, of its rigor, of its observance, of how to walk with it. There's a clash of exegesis, of interpretations of the written Torah based on each person's oral opinion. Shammai is literal, obsessive. Hillel is pragmatic, human. Have you ever thought that by lying down to pray you could die? It literally can happen if you do it literally, because a rabbi tried it. He wanted to fulfill a mitzvah to the letter, literally lying down as the text said, and he almost didn't tell. Yes, that's how risky it was to try to be more papist than the Pope during the time of the Mishna in the 2nd century under Roman persecution. The discussion of this Mishnah, viewed from the 21st century, seems stupid. In other words, it's arguing whether the observance of the night Shema should be done literally lying down, as Shammai says, or in any position you like, because lying down signifies a time in an era when there were no wristwatches, no wind-up watches, and even less so digital ones. This is the problem of legalism, of being a literal madman. One could even say that it seems that Shammai's school didn't believe in the oral Torah, but only in the written Torah. That wasn't the case, but let's explain the context again. There is a tradition that says the Second Temple was destroyed because of unjust hatred between people. In Judea at that time, in that first century generation, the Jews not only hated the Romans, which was logical given that it was an oppressive empire, but they also hated each other, including the Pharisees, the scholars, the observant, the sages. I don't know what you think, but when you read these insane things from the school of Shammai, it seems as if they only wanted to contradict Hillel's disciples without any valid argument. They just wanted to say something different, to separate, to create conflict. The result of a legalistic, strict school that made its own children and disciples suffer is what we know today. Shammai's house was razed by the Romans, and few of Shammai's disciples survived. Rabbi Eliezer was one of them, and although he entered Hillel's yeshiva school, he never forgot his first teacher. Why didn't he learn another tradition? Why didn't he simply keep quiet? Why did he argue with the wise chachamim? We'll see this later. This story is just beginning, but it seems as if an old parrot never learns to speak. Let's go back. Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel, two schools, two worldviews, and as always, the battlefield was spiritual. Faith, how to put faith into action to be counted as righteousness. The Shema, that small, great central text of Judaism, as short as it is controversial. Because how do you recite it correctly? Lying down at night, standing up in the morning, or however you want, as long as you're not juggling. In those days, that was the discussion. You already have the answer because the standardized response was Hillel's. It doesn't matter in what position you do it with faith, with conviction, with purity. For those who read and know the New Testament, the teachings of Jesus and his apostles, when the Pharisees came to Jesus to question him, to ask him questions, to harass him, were these Pharisees of the school of Shammai or Hillel? I think you know the answer now. So let's move on. Beit Shammai, true to its reputation, says, you must do it as the text says, period. At night, reclining. During the day, standing. When you lie down and when you get up isn't poetry, it's instruction. Biblical literalism at the level of do it as it is written or don't do it at all. Beit Hillel, as expected, breathes, thinks, interprets. No, it's not about the physical posture, it's about the time of day. It doesn't matter if you're standing, sitting, or traveling on a boat. The point is that you recite the Shema at the time people normally go to bed or get up. It's that simple. Because the Shema is a protection in your life on your journey at night when, especially in that era, wild beasts of the field began to hunt and bandits along the roads robbed travelers and even armed guerrilla groups fought against Roman troops. The dispute between Shammai and Hillel is not just a technical issue. It's an existential dispute. Do we interpret the law literally or do we understand its spirit? Do we kneel before the text or do we walk with it? Now that you understand these things, you'll be better informed the next time you read one of the epistles of the Apostle Paul, Saul of Tarsus by his original name, because he was a disciple of Gamliel of the house of Hillel. Are you now beginning to understand Second Temple Judaism? I hope so. Shammai represents the obsession with form. Hillel, the search for substance. And in that clash again is the heart of Rabbinic Judaism. How do you live the Torah without it becoming a straitjacket? Because if you have to risk your life to fulfill a commandment, something is wrong, very wrong. God is the God of the living, and the Sabbath was created for man. Although I'll tell you something very important. Today's Judaism is largely a child of Hillel. In Israel, the rabbis don't let anyone die for fulfilling the Torah, because the Torah is to be lived, not to be killed for. Remember that Judaism today, in the 21st century, almost everything is different except for the spiritual battles of heaven, which are the same. Today's Judaism has other problems. But in the time of the Second Temple, in the time of Jesus, in the time of the Roman Empire, this was the Judaism that was lived and studied. And it's not that Beit Hillel was more lax out of laziness. It was more flexible out of compassion, realism, and wisdom, because it understood that the Torah was not given for you to die for on the journey, but for you to live with it on the journey. Today, in times when many seek to return to the original, the pure, the literal, perhaps it's time to remember Rabbi Tarfon, he who wanted to do everything perfectly and almost didn't tell the tale. Because sometimes, in our attempt to be more faithful to the law, we end up betraying its purpose. And right there, between rigidity and flexibility, appears poor Rabbi Tarfon, a well-intentioned rabbi, a disciple of Beit Hillel, who decided to listen to Beit Shammai. Why? Because he believed that fulfilling the mitzvah more strictly would make him more pious, but that's not the case. What makes you pious is your heart, your will. The result? He lay down in the middle of the road to pray and was almost killed by robbers. No, it's not a parable. It's a life lesson. An obsession with religious perfection can cost you your life, and not because of divine intervention, but because of common sense. And what did the sages tell him? You deserved it. Not for praying, but for disobeying the fundamental principle, following the halakha established by your teacher Hillel. It wasn't a matter of extreme piety. It was a matter of responsibility, of context, of not turning the law into a death trap. If you made it this far, thank you, really. Thank you for staying, for listening, for thinking. If this content resonated with you, we invite you to subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, share it, and become part of this critical community that grows every day. With gratitude, as always, Abel Flores. See you in the next video.